first met Dr. Lynne Kitei in February 2004. I was introduced to her by an author who wrote the foreword in her best-selling book, The Phoenix Lights, A Skeptic's Discovery That We Are Not Alone. Dr. Lynne, who is formerly known in the media as Dr. X, spent many years compiling research on unexplained phenomena after witnessing 3 mysterious orbs of light that appeared very close to her mountainside home in 1995. I met Lynne for lunch, and she presented me with a notebook filled with numerous photos of anomalous light she witnessed and photographed. As I looked through her photos, I became more and more convinced that we had the makings of a good documentary, although at the time I wasn't really considering anything other than a 20-minute short film. After a series of emails over the next month or so, Lynne surprised me by quickly assembling dozens of witnesses and experts, and we decided to move forward with the project. Lynne and I basically produced this film out of our own pockets, and what started out as a short film evolved into a feature-length documentary. Production for the Phoenix Lights documentary began on May 12, 2004. We set up our first interview in a conference room at Arizona State University with Dr. Paul Cook and continued shooting every day for a solid week, including a trip to Tucson to interview Dr. Richard Powell, Dr. Gary Schwartz, and Lynne's son Dan, who also witnessed the mysterious orbs. Since this film was very low budget, our crew consisted of Dr. Lynne, who conducted all the interviews, my mother Nancy, who helped lug equipment and took all the production photos, and myself. I took care of all the driving, camera work, sound, and lighting. It was physically exhausting and time-consuming to move from one location to another, so Dr. Lynne arranged multiple interviews at each location. After a long week of shooting, we finished up the last round of interviews and shot Lynne's reenactments at her Paradise Valley home. After reviewing the dailies, Lynne and I decided there were some additional key interviews and B-roll coverage that we needed, so I flew back to Phoenix a month later for a 2-day shoot. I set up my camera near Luke Air Force Base to capture shots of F-16s flying in formation. It was blazing hot, over 112 degrees with no shade anywhere. On August 4th, I drove my family to Santa Barbara, California, to shoot an interview with Jim Delatoso and Dr. Rand Molnar, an expert in image analysis. We shot the interview at Brooks Institute's Montecito campus. Rand was an instructor of mine when I attended Brooks in 1983. After a brief family vacation in Newport Beach, I returned home and started working on a 10-minute short that Lynne wanted to show at the Bay Area UFO Expo later that month. Lynne was a keynote speaker at the expo, and I barely finished the short film in time for the event where the Phoenix Lights documentary made its first debut. It was the humble beginning for what was to become a feature-length documentary that overall took nearly 4 years to complete. I returned to Phoenix once again from October 15th to the 17th to shoot additional interviews, reenactments, and Phoenix backgrounds. Other interviews were shot at my home a year later, and Keith Ritchie, a news cameraman in Phoenix, shot additional B-roll and interviews as well, including Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who was added in December 2007, along with a 9/11 operator and a professional pilot. Lynne videotaped other orbs and formations in 2005 that were also added to the film. Overall, we shot about 25 hours of footage, all of which had to be captured digitally into the computer and organized. It's one of the most tedious tasks in an editing job and very time-consuming. I have to emphasize that it was an enormous task for 2 people to tackle a project of this size. Normally when an editor edits a feature film, the scenes are all marked and ordered according to the storyline of the script. Documentaries are a real challenge to edit because you don't have a script to work from. You basically have a bunch of interviews that somehow have to be pieced together in a way that tells a story in a cohesive way. Add to that the difficulty of trying to explain a complicated event with many perspectives and put it all into layman's terms while maintaining authenticity and integrity. Another challenge we faced was obtaining or creating the enormous amount of inserts, coverage, photos, and animations that were needed. Collectively, I spent many months creating hundreds of simulations and effects that were needed to effectively demonstrate what happened on March 13th. Most of the simulations and effects were composites consisting of many elements that had to be pieced together and programmed with motion controls. It was a very tedious task, rendering each effect, checking, tweaking, re-rendering, and repeating this process over and over again. Then, of course, I had to add the numerous sound effects and create many musical pieces for the soundtrack. Our goal was to complete the film in time to submit it into the 2005 Phoenix Film Festival. The final deadline was December 31st, and it was a monumental task to try to finish the film on time. We worked tirelessly for months, but the film was still very raw-looking by the entry deadline. Our next goal was to complete the film in time for the March 13th anniversary of the Phoenix Lights event. Harkins Theaters graciously scheduled 3 special showings on Sunday, March 13, 2005. With the date set and Lynne working hard to promote the world premiere, I was under tremendous pressure to finish the documentary in time. All too soon, the big day arrived. Terry Mansfield, the key witness we interviewed for the documentary, hosted a cast party at her home in Paradise Valley. It was a beautiful morning, and everyone who attended had a relaxing time while engaging in some very stimulating conversation. After lunch, we headed off to Harkins Shea 14 Theaters in Scottsdale. Lynne did a great job of promoting the film with the local press and media, and all 3 shows were completely sold out. Lynne and I hosted Q&As after each show, along with cast members who were invited to stand up front and answer questions from the audience. The documentary was still a diamond in the rough as far as Lynne and I were concerned. So after the premiere, we spent the better part of 3 years perfecting the film, adding additional interviews, special effects, archive footage, new sightings, and Symington's public confession that he saw the Phoenix Lights craft himself. The film has been an official selection in over a dozen festivals worldwide and received 3 nominations for Best Documentary Feature. The Phoenix Lights won 2 international awards, including Best Documentary Feature and Best Director, and has been screened at numerous events, including the X Conference in Washington, D.C., the International MUFON Symposium, and the Bay Area UFO Expo. In addition, the film has been screened at Warner Brothers Studios, the famous Mann's Chinese Theater in Hollywood, and the Crest Theater in Westwood. Once you rule out all possible natural and man-made explanations for the Phoenix Lights, there is only one explanation that, despite what the debunkers say, cannot be conclusively ruled out. Perhaps we are being visited by our cosmic neighbors, stopping by to check us out. If you consider that the universe is full of life, we are just another race of beings, nothing special. Other more advanced species of life could certainly observe us, just as we observe most of the life forms on this planet. Considering the trillions of planets in our own galaxy, the hundreds of billions of galaxies in the universe, and how rugged, diverse, and adaptive life is, there's virtually no scientific or logical probability that we are alone. In fact, there could be civilizations out there millions or even billions of years ahead of us. We don't know who is really out there or what their capabilities are, so anything is possible. For many people, seeing is believing, but until we have open contact, there's nothing wrong with keeping an open mind.
I fully believe that we're not alone, and have for many, many years, even though, but at the time I went to the moon, it was the conventional wisdom, both in science and theology, that we were alone in the universe.
Over the past few years, I've spoken to many witnesses and UFO experts, and personally witnessed 2 independent sightings. There's no doubt in my mind that we're being discreetly visited. The big question ultimately boils down to who is covering it up and why. The more you look at the evidence, the more obvious it becomes that the truth about extraterrestrial presence has been intentionally covered up for a long time.
We have to remember that right after World War II, the Army Air Force was separated and became the Air Force, a separate branch of service, and that the OSS, which was the Office of Special Services, was disbanded and eventually became the CIA. So that here was a major military organization and a major intelligence organization totally in disarray, new founded, didn't know what they were doing after World War II and not really reorganized yet. And as a result of that, the President Truman at that time convened a very high-level committee to examine this alien or UFO phenomenon. They did come to the conclusion that it was alien, and the military rightly came to the conclusion, if they're hostile, there's nothing we can do about it. Therefore, their choice was to deny it and to hush it up and create the National Security Act of 1947, which validated that deception and covered it up and allowed the group to go underground, as it were. And we've been living with that now for 50 years. It is really the beginning of the whole cover-up, the entire denial of this phenomenon.
I believe that we're getting very close to the truth being exposed, and that's why it's so important for everyone to at least keep an open mind. At some point, we have to consider the possibility of joining our vast cosmic community. The potential benefits are far more reaching than any one of us can imagine. Huge advances in technology and medicine, free energy, universal knowledge, and evolution to a more spiritually enlightened society where war and violence is virtually eliminated.
It's important that we look at our civilization, our place in history, use our tools of science for greater understanding, to promote the greater good, and that's what it's all about.
The big question we should be asking is, how do we transition to a highly spiritual and peaceful race with total openness and integration into a vast cosmic society? The transformation will be a challenging one, and I believe it's a process that every civilization must face at some point in its evolution.